on in, and please put yourselves on gallery view so you can see everyone on this call. Welcome. This is a live event and on still coming out. Our evolving identity is LGBTQ. And I'm loving to see all the faces as we open these doors. Tell us, go to the chat. Tell us where you're calling in from. We like to be interactive on these calls. So go to your chat. Tell us where you are calling from. Where are you in the world? San Francisco, Tucson. Great. Hi, Hope. I just saw her yesterday here in Denver, London, DC, New Jersey, all over Palm Springs. Thank you for being here. This is going to be a wonderful call. We have a great panel. Wow, North Carolina. Awesome. Welcome. Again, please put yourselves in gallery view so you can see. We'll be spotlighting our speakers today, but you can always change back to gallery view or watch that way. But we're really happy to have you here today. And I'd love to bring Chip Conley up, our founder and CEO of Modern Elder Academy, MEA, and he will be introducing the rest of our panel. Thank you for, I'm just gonna spotlight you, Chip.
Yeah.
And here you are in Santa Fe, right?
I am in Santa Fe with Wolf Martinez right next to me. Yes, very excited. We'll hear from Wolf in a few minutes. Let me just say thanks for coming. We had 167 people RSVP for this, so we have a lot of people in the community who are here. Some of you might not identify as LGBTQ plus ... yet. We're recruiting today. No, you may be just curious. That's great. And then there's others of you who are here and fully proud and excited about being on this call, because the idea of talking about and listening to people exploring what does it mean to be coming out as an LGBTQ plus person in a world in which sometimes we're invisible. We're invisible when we were younger, but maybe more invisible when we get older. So let me just tell you who's on the panel today. And I'll be interviewing each person individually. We'll have some conversation. For the last 20 minutes or so of today's 1 hour session, we'll open it up for Q&A. And so if you have questions, I would say wait to put your questions in the chat till maybe the bottom of the hour. We'll also give you the opportunity to raise your hand. And yeah, let's have an interesting conversation. So I already introduced Wolf, who is right next to me, who lives here in the Santa Fe area. In fact, within about a 20-minute drive from our campus, which is, this is Santa Fe. There's a guy named Woody Gwynn, very famous artist who lives in Galisteo, who painted this, and it's really a painting of the ranch here. We also have Mason Funk, who I will introduce. My sister just came on, my lesbian sister, who just went to MEA this last month. So yay, good to see you, Annie. So Mason is here with us and may be joining us in June at the workshop. I'll introduce him a little bit more, ask him a couple questions. We've got Dr. Angela Goepferd right there. Thank you for being here, my dear. And we've got Christian de la Huerta, who's calling in from Fort Lauderdale. Angela is in Minneapolis area. Yep, up there. Mason, are you calling in from LA?
Palm Springs.
Palm Springs, of course. Such a life. Then we've got Deborah Newbren, who's coming in from the Bay Area. And then we got Wolf here with me. So let's get started. I want to start with you, Mason. And the reason I want to start with you is because you started harassing me many years ago. I'm kidding, harassing, but you said, like, I'm starting this thing called OUTWORDS, and I really would love your support. And I really want to help elevate the voices of elders. And I got to tell you, I have such an admiration for you, because you were doing this way before MEA existed, way before a lot of organizations addressing elder voices in the LGBTQ community existed. So tell us a little bit about OUTWORDS and your involvement in it, and what's unique about an elder voice in the gay community, the broader gay lesbian community, relative to the general population.
Well, thank you, Chip, first of all, and thanks to all who are participating today. It is true that Chip and I met about 8 years ago through a mutual friend. And my friend, I had told him about this notion for a project called OUTWORDS, or formerly the OUTWORDS Archive. And Chip was supportive from day one and has been very supportive until today. So I really, really appreciate that. The notion that came to me, it actually had come to me 2 years earlier, June 2014. I woke up one night, I don't know what it was, but I just couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning, and somehow I looked back over my own life from the days when I was a terrified gay teenager with no notion whatsoever of what life could look like. Fast forward to, I was asleep that night, or not asleep as it turns out, next to my legally married husband with a rich, full life, a career that I had enjoyed, pretty much all the things you would hope for in life. And I was struck by the question of how did this happen? And I knew it wasn't due to my own efforts. Many, many, many people had gone before me, and they had found a path through the wilderness. As a filmmaker, as a documentary filmmaker who has always enjoyed interviewing people, I thought, I want to find these people. I want to find them wherever they are. They got active in their 20s, 30s, and 40s, and now they're in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And I want to record their stories, preserve them, and share them with the world. Very early on, I was aware I would record their stories just for the experience of recording them. But very quickly, I perceived that their stories had tremendous value, and we're seeing this in our current world, tremendous value and impact, whether it's educational, strategical, or just inspirational for current and future generations of queer youth, who, particularly at a time like today, are very, very much being buffeted by the winds of political change, cultural change, clashes. One of our interviewees in the summer of 2016, Carla J., a really amazing lesbian activist in New York City, she said in 2016, and this was before the presidential election, she said, everything, all the rights we think we have obtained can be taken away. And I said, in my mind, maybe not out loud, well, maybe not. But sure enough, what we're facing right now is a lot of pushback. And I think the thing that I have gleaned mostly from our elders, and which I was talking about just yesterday with one of our team members at OUTWORDS, is our elders have seen the tide come in and go out many, many times over the past 50, 60 years. Just think about the AIDS epidemic as one example, when the level of stigmatization and horror on the part of the vast majority of society was like an incredible tidal wave. And we survived. And here we are. And people who are living with HIV no longer have to cower in the corner wondering whether anybody will visit them or even have the right to visit them in the hospital. So we have seen enormous changes over the past 50, 60 years. And this is one of the things that I think our elders have to contribute to the world we live in today, is how do you survive through the tough times as well as thriving in the good times?
Thank you, Mason. I mean, so I'm going to come back to you, but this is such a great segue to talk with Angela, because Angela, you work with intergenerationally, you work with people who are gender fluid, trans people. I'd love to help us understand a little bit more, and for our workshop that we're doing here in Santa Fe this June during Pride Month, Angela and Christian and Wolf and Deborah and I will be the faculty. And so, Angela, tell us a little bit about your perspective right now in terms of what you're seeing. Especially tell us a little bit about your role,
Sure.
because you have a very high profile role in the medical community in Minnesota.
Yeah. So I'm a pediatrician and founded and currently support as medical director our gender health program here at Children's Minnesota, which is the largest gender health program in the region where I live in the upper Midwest here, supporting trans and gender diverse youth and their families. And, you know, I have been a pediatrician now for 18 years and have always cared for LGBTQ youth, and really can, you know, speak to in my own life as a queer and non-binary person, but also in my life as a pediatrician, just the swings that we've gone through culturally that Mason was referencing, and never really imagined that I would find myself in the position that I am now, which is really as a national advocate, both in the legislative arena and really in kind of media and public policy, around trying to keep our LGBTQ young people safe and protect the very rights that Mason was referencing that seem to be slipping through our fingers. And so one of the perspectives that, you know, that I bring as someone who has been to Modern Elder Academy and is entering my elder years, and as someone who works on a regular basis with young people who are part of the LGBTQ community, is this intergenerational opportunity that I see. And I think one thing that I experience directly with parents and grandparents of the young people that I care for is just a lot of missed opportunity around understanding language and understanding identity. So a little personal anecdote that I'll share is, you know, when I was a kid, I was a tomboy. That's how everyone referred to me. And then I was, you know, a somewhat sort of either just not paying attention or confused adolescent, and then went to college and then came out. And so at the time I came out and was identified as a lesbian. And because of my sort of gender presentation, I was often self-referring to myself and other people as a butch lesbian or a masculine woman, or those kinds of words. And then I moved to Minneapolis and started medical school. And then I became someone who was genderqueer, because that was new language at the time. And I thought, well, yeah, that's me. That fits for me. And now here I am at 47 and I'm non-binary. And I have been the same exact human being from the time I was 6 years old till the time I'm 47. What has changed isn't me or my gender expression or my gender identity. What has changed is the language around that. And so I think generationally, we get really wrapped up in language and pronouns, and, you know, I can't use they, them, or I don't understand what demi boy means, or all of these things. And so one thing that I'm really looking forward to exploring at the workshop is this idea of placing ourselves in terms of our own sexual and gender identities, and then learning language to help us bridge that intergenerational gap between the younger generations, because the work we have ahead of us is exactly the work that Mason outlined. We are at a point in history where we have more LGBTQ elders and more powerful LGBTQ elders than we've ever had. And we need our community of elders to be leaning in and not stepping around the outside and afraid of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing, but leaning in to help our community and to help our young people right now.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. We're honored that you're going to be joining us. And I want to go to Christian now. And Christian, you and I have known each other for, you know, almost a quarter century. I deeply loved your book and love your book, Coming Out Spiritually. And one of the things I think that you'll be bringing to the workshop and just to our MEA community, because you're also an MEA alum, is this idea of how do we move from ego to soul? And how do we use breath work and other forms of spiritual and mindfulness practices as ways to, you know, become deeper connected to something, to our soul? Do you want to talk about that? Maybe just a little bit about your, how Coming Out Spiritually, a book that was very well regarded. And when did the book come out?
99.
Yeah. So
many years ago.
Yep. Talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Well, and I think it's so relevant to the theme of our gathering in Santa Fe in June, which is about our evolving identity in the way that Angela was speaking about in a very personal way. It applies to us as a community, because many of us struggle with that. And I can't tell you how often I heard when I was researching for Coming Out Spiritually, so many LGBTQ people had a more difficult time coming out as spiritual to our own community than coming out as LGBTQ. to their straight friends, to the world. And I find that so tragic and yet understandable, because many of us confuse religion and spirituality. And so, like me, many of us threw the baby out with the baptismal water. We wanted nothing to do with anything that smacked of religion or spirituality. And yet the tragic aspect of that is, before the patriarchal cultures and religions, people that we today call LGBTQ were not only spiritually inclined, but were actually honored, revered in many cases for the roles of spiritual service and leadership that we played all over the world. And as far as I'm concerned, if we're talking about figuring out, accepting, loving who we are as human beings, it's just as ludicrous to try to do that by rejecting any part of who we are, whether it's our sexuality, which I know I'm not the only one here who tried to do that at some point as a young man, or to reject our spirituality. It's just an inherent part of who we are. And we get stuck in that because of definitions and how we define what is ultimately undefinable. So part of my work, and whether, with anybody, whether any of the human being that I work with, it's about helping us to get to that place of profound self-love, profound self-acceptance. And it begins with, opening our eyes and expanding how we see ourselves.
Yeah, and some of that, I have a book that came out a month and a half ago called Learning to Love Midlife, 12 Reasons Why Life Gets Better with Age. And one whole chapter of this book, was really, in many ways, influenced by Richard Rohr's point of view. Richard Rohr is teaching here at MEA at our ranch campus in Santa Fe in July. Christian mystic, wrote a book called The Universalist Christ, but what he's most famous for maybe is his book called Falling Upward, about the idea of spirituality in the second half of our life. And he said that the first half of our life, our primary operating systems are ego, for all kinds of reasons. It's what individuated us from our family and our parents, and it's what propelled us forward. And he says that around midlife, and this is unrelated to LGBTQ issues, although he's very LGBTQ friendly. He said, the thing that happens around midlife is the primary operating system shifts from our ego to our soul, but nobody told us it was coming. No one told us that was happening, and no one gave us a roadmap to understand it. And so I think we'll be exploring that, in the broader context, but also in the context of, when we have had a history of traditional religion seeming to plot against us, not just past tense, but present tense in some cases. It is hard to have the cognitive dissonance of both feeling a sense of connection to a religion or spirituality, while at the same time feeling that we're being frozen out by certain people in that religious community. Which brings me to our rabbi, Deborah Newbern, who I have known since my beloved Oren and I first got together in 1989, because Oren knew Deborah. Oren, my partner and husband, is Israeli and Jewish. And so Deborah, when I first got to know Deborah, she was not a rabbi. In fact, then she had a longtime partner who was a rabbi, and then Deborah became a rabbi. And Deborah is not only an MEA alum, but she's also a facilitator at MEA. So Deborah, tell us a little bit more about your perspective, not just from the point of view of being a rabbi and being Jewish, but maybe just in general, because you've been actually facilitating workshops at MEA.
Yeah, I have. And it's such an honor, and it's always special, and it kind of surprises me each time that there's a kind of a magic alchemy that happens for every group. And I think, in reflection, part of what happens as we age is that the transitions that we go through alone. This is regardless of whether you're straight, gay, woman, man, and you get a bad diagnosis, it happens to you by yourself. Your parents start dying, it happens to you by yourself. Your whole community isn't going through that with you. And maybe you have a few friends who you share that with, but I think the the magic that happens at MEA is all of a sudden you come together with a group of elders and there is commonality in the aging experiences we have, the things that happen as we age. And so there's this community that forms that's intense. We drop right into sharing real things right away. And there are a few things that stick out to me. One is having an attitudinal shift about aging adds years to your life. And we live in a culture that really venerates youth and doesn't acknowledge and honor elders. And so when we can do it for ourselves and make aging aspirational and positive, we lead better lives. These stories that we tell ourselves really matter. And then there are a few things about the MEA experience that, like, in fact, really did affect my life. For example, I did not become an ordained rabbi until I was in my 60s. I didn't need it for my career. I didn't need it for any other reason, but I had been through this MEA mindset workshop about, like, oh, I can't learn Hebrew, or I can't do these things that were in my mindset, and to just open yourself to the possibility of, yes, I can, and I actually don't have to learn Hebrew to be a good rabbi. And actually, that's the decision I made, was like, I can read it, but I'm not going to really learn Hebrew at age 60, but I can do enough of being a good rabbi. And so it's those are some of the things that I've really loved. I've really loved a workshop talking about transitions, and I think we will be looking at that. Bruce Feiler of that we go through life quakes and disruptors, and how can we get better at navigating the transitions that we will all inevitably have to face. So I've really appreciated those workshops. And probably the thing I'll end with is a teaching that we do at MEA around spirituality, and we teach Viktor Frankl, this teacher who lived perhaps through one of life's worst atrocities, which was he was in a concentration camp and he came out alive. And his very core teaching is that between stimulus and response, there is a pause. And in that pause lies our power and our freedom. And I think as elders, as we age, we get much more comfortable with the pause. We've lived through enough life that we don't have to react as quickly. And therein lies part of our strength. So I love that part of it too.
Thank you, Deborah. Well, now let's finish with Wolf, and then we'll have a group conversation amongst the panelists, and then we'll open it up for questions. So what a finding. You know, a number of people told me, I need to meet Wolf, because Wolf is based here. He is someone of Native American background as well as Hispanic roots, both. And one of the things that's true about being in New Mexico is you better respect the history of this land and of this place and of the elders who have been here and the elders who are currently here. So I'd love to have you say a few things about what it means to be two-spirit. Christians sort of alluded to it earlier about the fact that in the past, societies often sort of looked at people who were not easy to categorize, male, female, as special and unique and having some kind of role. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about what two-spirit means and what it's like to live here in New Mexico.
You know, I really loved what you said, Christian. Hearing you speak just now is just reminding me again and again, you know, like you were such a brother. So much of where I'm coming from is a very similar and the same, actually, perspective, in that spending so much time with my elders from various nations and tribes, looking to remember how, as LGBTQ people, what we call that in this patriarchal society, in the old ways, we were considered third gender, fourth gender, fifth gender people with an inherent balance between our masculine and feminine when we lived in matriarchal societies. But this dominant society today, this patriarchal society, has caused us to forget, or forced us to forget, who we inherently truly are. And that has been a big part of what I'm doing in this world, is holding ceremonies and providing people with the opportunity to have that direct experience with our masculine and our feminine, and to understand the roles of who we are and our original instructions And yeah, that's a little bit about what I've been doing. I'm a ceremonial leader. I do healing work and traveling many places around the world, bringing these ceremonies and workshops and retreats to people. Not just LGBTQ, two-spirit, third gender people, but to all people. And a lot of my retreats really are a blend with gay, straight, all, blend of all kinds of people, all ages and all races.
Beautiful, beautiful. So one of the things that I think I love about what you're saying, Wolf, is one of the things that I write about in the book is the idea that as we get older, we become better alchemists. We learn how to actually take our polarities, whether it's, masculine, feminine, yin, yang, extrovert, introvert, gravitas, levity, curious, wise, and we blend them into this human who is not just growing old, but we're growing whole. We grow whole by actually learning how to alchemize the polarities.
Remembering who we truly are.
Yeah, and I would say that's a great jumping off point for us maybe to, as a panel, explore what does it mean to be an elder in the queer community or in the LGBTQ plus community. What are there advantages and disadvantages around what it means to be a person of who doesn't fit the normal sexual gender and orientation of society? What's the upside? What's the downside? And in your own life or in general, who'd like to start there?
Well, I'll jump in. I think one of the things that we early in the days of Outwards, we interviewed a woman named Shirley Greens, whose son was named Rob Eichberg, and he lived out his last days actually in New Mexico before passing away from AIDS complications. But while he was alive, he wrote a book called Coming Out: An Act of Love. And it was a seminal book. It was published in the late 80s. And it was really coining the notion that coming out, it's such a terrifying notion in those days. And still, that, oh my God, what are they going to say? And, so forth, but that it's an act of love. It's bringing the people in our lives into our lives and saying, I want you to know who I am. And I think one of the things that pretty much all queer people had to experience at some point over our lives was the notion of coming out. But it's a notion that everybody is yearning for and desiring in their lives. I remember a specific book club session where one of the people, we had all read a book, we all loved it. And finally, one person, my friend Hillary, raised her hand and said, I didn't like it. Well, that was a coming out moment. She was bucking the tide to be who she authentically was. And so I think one of the things that the queer community has to offer the world is something that the world is hungry for, which is the notion of coming out, inching our way. Sometimes it's very incremental, but pulling back the layers and saying, this is who I am in the world. This is the unique identity that was given me to share with you. And I hope we can talk about it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. No, I'll build a little bit on what Mason was saying. I mean, I think that, universally, if you were to ask me at any point in my life, even during the hardest times of either coming out as queer or navigating my gender identity, I wouldn't trade who I am or being a part of this community for anything. It is absolutely a gift to me, and it makes me who I am and how I show up in the world. And I know that with every fiber of my being. And yet, when we survey LGBTQ young people, 35% of them don't see hope for their future, don't think that they can grow up to be successful adults, don't think that they have a place. And so the gift of being an elder is knowing that we have a place, knowing all the gifts we bring, like Mason just described about how to live as our authentic selves, the freedom that I have to get up and put on whatever I want in my closet. And I don't have to meet so many of the expectations that are out there that are placed on cisgender and heterosexual people. But it's also the gift of being able to tell younger generations, whether they are LGBTQ or not, there is a future for you. And it's a wonderful future. And we'll get there together. And so I think we have the gift of being on this side of it, and we have the opportunity to help each other and help other generations know what's in store for them.
Beautiful.
And
Deborah,
I'll piggyback off of that.
Christian, go ahead, and then Deborah.
I'll piggyback off of what Angela just said. One of the roles that I wrote about in Coming Out Spiritually, one of the what I called archetypes, roles that LGBTQ people played throughout history, which to me are fulfilling a spiritual function, is that of the outsider. You know, we just by virtue of who we are, we stand outside of the mainstream. The downside of that is that we can feel lonely and isolated. And I know I'm not the only one in here who grew up feeling like I'm the only one. Not so current, you know, not so much in current time. Like it's much more wide, you know, widely open about it. The benefit of that, though, the upside of that is that that's what makes us such great chroniclers and observers of society. That gives us the ability to see both the forest and the trees. And as we were talking today, I just started thinking that as elders within the LGBTQ community, it's also easy to feel like an outsider, like we no longer fit. And so it's an archetype that we can reclaim and even add that extra layer to, that it is a gift and a blessing to be that role. And that also it's one of the things that I appreciate about this work that MEA is bringing forth, which is to create community that we don't have to feel lonely and rejected and cast aside, and that as we reclaim and redefine and expand and own for ourselves that role of elder, we can add meaning to what otherwise could be a life of loneliness and giving up.
Beautiful. Deborah.
Yeah, I'm going to exactly add just another thought about what it means to be othered, which is what we all are. We have been othered in our lives, which means we don't fit with everybody else. It gives us great compassion for everybody else who is othered, and we live in a very diverse society. And so if you mostly blend into the mainstream, and I can speak as being, you know, kind of a femme lesbian, where people don't look at me and say lesbian, at least I don't think they do. And so all that, and they also don't look at me and say Jewish. There's just not identifiable markers on me. And so if I want people to know my identity, I always have to come out and tell them about it. But the compassion, I think, that we develop in experiencing what it feels like to be rejected from places or have that fear, am I going to be fired from this job? Can I tell this story? Helps us be empathetic with others. I think the second point I'll make is, as historians of the queer experience before all the books are written, we were at the women's festivals, or I had to put my kid up for adoption so my wife could adopt her, my first wife, adopt them. And that history hasn't quite been written, at least it's not in the mainstream. So when I sit with when I sit with groups of young queer folks, which I have the opportunity to do in big kind of camp gatherings and have an elder panel, we talk about things that they just like didn't know, because nobody knew that part of our lives. And so we have that opportunity to be also educators of our history.
Beautiful. Wolf, anything you want to add?
I mean, misfit, I feel like, you know, that's like, it's my life story. And, you know, it's through that soul and that heart connection that we recognize the humanity in all people, you know, in ourself, embracing our own humanity and seeing that thread that connects us to the whole of humanity. And to me, that is the key. That is the core of our being. And you know, being an elder, which I'm learning to embrace still, accept and embrace. I think that with age, you know, we come more and more into that, as was being said earlier, in our second half of, I think you were saying that, right? Second half of our life, you know, that soul part of ourself, the heart. And as an elder, is that not our responsibility to help everyone remember that part that is so essential to our being?
Beautiful. So we're going to go to questions in a moment. And so if you have a question, I'd recommend that you go to the reactions button at the bottom and just click on that, and you'll see there's a raise hand function. You can ask it in the chat as well, but I will probably opt more for the people who are raising hands unless we don't have enough space there, and I'll look over there. So maybe someone on our team, Leslie or Connor, can make sure that if I've missed a question, that would be great. So think about what you want to ask to this group or what you want to add, because it doesn't have to be a question necessarily. It shouldn't be a long conversation. So if you want to say something and comment about something in your own personal experience, we would love to hear it. The thing I'd like to say before we go to questions is the following. So we have a workshop. It's in June. It's in Pride Month. It's, if I'm not mistaken, June 17th through the 22nd. It's a 5-night program here at our ranch. It's only a month after we've opened the ranch. So you'll be one of the first, if you come, you'll be one of the first people to come and experience this 2,600-acre ranch with, dozens of hiking and horseback riding and biking trails and lots of opportunities to sit under the stars and experience the cosmos. Lots of opportunity to have deep conversations. So our programs typically are they're deep, as Deborah was mentioning earlier. You really feel a deep sense of connection. This is the first time we're doing an LGBTQ plus workshop, so we hope it goes really well. We already have a dozen people who are signed up, and we'll have probably somewhere between 20 and 30 or 35 people in the workshop, let's say approximately. So, if you're going to sign up soon, there is financial aid available. We only have a certain number of financial aid spaces, but, keep that in mind as well. I was going to say one more thing. I can't think of what else I was going to say. Oh, yes. Niche-oriented workshops. So this is our first LGBTQ plus workshop, but we've done Black Modern Elder workshops that have been just phenomenal. We actually have one also in June in Baja. We've done women's workshops. We are going to do men's workshops. We have a Spanish-speaking workshop happening in April in Baja. So what I like about the niche-oriented workshops is, especially as someone who's gay, is to be able to come to a workshop and not have to sort of figure out, oh, is this a friendly person? Can I actually tell them that I'm gay? But instead to immediately embrace them and say like, oh, thank God we're all gay and lesbian and trans and queer and bi and every single piece of it, questioning, etc. Because it allows us to sort of cut to the chase in terms of who we are a little bit faster. So I see that Jim's hand is up. Jim is a 2-time MEA alum last year, learned how to surf at 87 in Baja, and is a phenomenal person. So we also have an affinity group. For those of you who are not MEA alums yet, there's an MEA affinity group that meets once a quarter and talks about these kinds of topics. So that's just online. Jim, what's on your mind?
Hi, everybody. I wanted to add one change in the vocabulary. I love what Deborah had to say about there is a chemical magic that happens in an MEA workshop. But for those of you who don't know MEA and who have not been able to come and share that magic, she said very sweetly, it's really nice when a group of elders get away. Let's drop that word for a minute. I know we know it came because Chip was hired by a group of 22-year-olds and they called him a modern elder. So he picked that term. It's not elderly. I'm going to make up an age, and Chip or Leslie or somebody is going to have to correct me later on. I would guess the median age of the attendees is somewhere around probably in the late 50s. It's mainly a group of 55 to 65-year-olds. I'm an elder. I'll be 89 in September. I'm a young elder, but I'm past the messy middle. But everybody else is 55 to 65. So don't think you're going to come there and be with a group of ancient people that are humped over walkers. It's a young, vigorous, in the prime of their life people. Okay, that's all.
Thank you, my friend. And Jim, do you want to say a second about Are you open to telling your story? You were married to
No, I was
married to a
married.
woman for a
Married.
long time, have
I was
kids,
married for
and then
15 years. A very, very lovely gal. And when we separated, and I found myself in a very strange place in the world, and I was living out of the country on top of it. And it wasn't a matter of coming out. A year later, I showed up with a partner of a wonderful man, my age, at my side, and we stayed together for 48 years and created businesses and had a very, very big life. And it was never a matter of and living in a very small town, people said, gosh, Jim, wasn't it very difficult? I mean, being two men in a small town. I said, no, it didn't matter. We were just Jim and Bob and Jim, both very tough businessmen running two very successful businesses. And it wasn't a matter of whether we were gay, straight, and life has been like that for me my whole entire life. I don't live, I must confess, whether it is right or wrong, Mason, I can't say I live in the LBG world. No, I don't. I live in the world. And then in a small town, it is not one way or the other. You just are part of the world, right? Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jim.
Yep.
All right. So Tom, do you have your hand up or no? No, you were there for a second. Who would like to ask a question or make a comment? And if not, I'm going to call on somebody. Sheila, I want to call on you. If you're open to it, just tell us a little bit about your story. And then after Sheila says something, we'll go to David.
Wow. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Chip. My name's Sheila. I just had my first MEA experience. It was incredible. I was there just a couple weeks ago. I came out in my 20s, and I have been working with young people for the last 35 years as the executive director of a nonprofit summer camp in the San Juan Islands in Washington. And so I'm really drawn to this conversation because, Angela, it's a lot of what you were saying is, how do we work intergenerationally and still be relevant and tell our stories? Because my story coming out is much different than some of these kids who have a lot more assurance and validation in coming out. But I love the idea of being an elder and being an active participant in kind of that changing and evolving way that we create culture and become more of the norm. So that's my short story.
Thank you. I hope you and Deborah get to compare stories because she was running a nonprofit summer camp as well. So lots for you to talk about. Let's go to David. David Klein, who I've known for a long time.
Do you want quick backstory and then the question?
Yeah.
So quick backstory, I've been out queer since I was 17. I'm 68. So I started as a young gay boy in the late 60s in New York and San Francisco. Met my husband at the ripe age of 23 and have been with him and married to him for 45 years.
Mm-hmm.
I am deep into the space of being the successful public guy, totally out, and the quintessential outsider. And I feel that knife's edge and that balance and that wonderment and the desire to understand and live that as best I can. I navigate the world very well and always feel other than.
Mm.
And I share that and wonder about it.
Mm. Would you be open to joining us in June?
I looked at my calendar and there's a very strong chance of a yes.
Yes, because it'd be great to have a sense of belonging with this group. We'd love to have you there. So thank you. Thank you.
you
I
all.
think a lot of us have had that sense of being the misfit, being even when you're in a, like for me, when I'm hanging out with a bunch of gay men, quite frankly, I'm sorry, Mason, but when I'm in Palm Springs with a bunch of gay men, I can feel this sort of like, oh no, it's all the same. We all are all the same. We're all white, older gay men. And I struggle with that. That's when I need to feel like I'm in a place where there's other people there, because I somehow get verklempt right now. I get a little bit lost when I'm in a situation where I feel like I have to fit in with these other people who are just like me. And I'm lucky enough, my sister's on the call right now, spent a lot of time in our junior high school and high school and very integrated inner city schools where we were a minority as a white person, and really appreciated that. So I just think the more we can feel a deep sense of not having to fit in, but then feeling the sense of belonging at the same time. It's an interesting juxtaposition. Let's go to Jerome. Jerome is a world traveler. He's an MEA alum. Where in the world are you right now, Jerome?
Hi, Chip. First of all, great to see you. You look great at the moment, so at least, so all the best. I am in London, and so as Chip mentioned, I'm fortunate to be part of the EMEA family, and looking forward. So I'm going to be at the workshop in Santa Fe in June. Now, I guess my concern all along, so even when I did sign up for it last year, in the title, it says still coming out, and it's our evolving identity for this webinar. I've got a very different story. So I didn't have to come out. I'm 56. I didn't have all the struggles you referred to, and I'm very intrigued and compelled by what Angela said about language. So I'm sitting here on the webinar, and the language we use is like coming out and, misfit and so on and so forth. I haven't had that as an experience, and maybe I'm the odd one out. So
well, let me ask you a question. I have a question for you, Jerome, because when we said still coming out, we meant actually coming out as an elder.
Yes. Yeah. So
do you feel like you have to come out as an elder?
No, not at all. And so my question is whether we will also be tapping on a different journey, which is not one of struggle, not one of, and it's just belonging as opposed to trying to fit in, which is, I understand I may have a very different experience to the, maybe I'm the odd one out, but I think it would be interesting also to hear the other side of the coin and the different, a different journey, which is not one of struggle, not one, I'm 56, still coming out also as an elder. So I guess it's a question, are we also going to look at it from a different perspective as well?
I would say, and I want to hear Deborah's perspective on this too, the content we'll have will be inclusive of some of our core content of MEA, which is how do we reframe our relationship with aging while navigating transitions, cultivating purpose, and learning how to own our wisdom. I think the owning our wisdom will be a big piece of this as gay elders or LGBTQ elders. So the idea of still coming out is, for at least when we came up with that original title, was the idea not that we're necessarily coming out as gay people over and over again, but actually that we're coming out as elders at times as well. And that is a piece of language, as Jim said earlier, that is ill-fitting for some, especially in the gay community, where there's a veneration, especially gay males, in younger Adonis bodies of the world. So thank you for, yes, it's going to be a very, with this, there's a lot of talent in this panel. There's a lot of perspective. And this is going to be a very unique workshop. Usually you have just one or two people, sort of maybe three people leading, and we'll have a lot more than that and a lot of different voices. So I would say that because it's constituted the way it is, it would be great, Jerome, for you to come with the topics you want us to cover as well, because I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity for conversations, and it's going to go all over. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We have, there was a question asked earlier and we'll go to in a moment to Michael. The question was one that was asked about rituals. Tonua had a question, which was, can the panel speak to the experience as a member of the LGBTQ plus community experiencing rituals that are not experiential in our community, specifically marriage and divorce? And I think I don't know. If someone feels compelled to answer that, go for it, Deborah.
Yeah, I think that is exactly right. That there is a lack of rituals for just people who age in general. Once you kind of get past your weddings and birth ceremonies, and kind of in this kind of great from 35 or 40 all the way until you start going to funerals, there aren't rituals. And I've done a lot of thinking and inventing of rituals in a workshop I wrote called a ritual hackathon. And it's kind of like, what rituals do we need as queer people, as women people, whatever the group I'm working with? And I've had some great, in this workshop, what comes out are things like, I need a ritual for when I change my gender identity. And I need people to know this, and there's no ritual. I go from one day, my pronouns change or my body looks different, and there's no ritual for us to do it. And rituals are very important in the transitions we make, and very supportive, can be so supportive. And so we have to empower ourselves to make up rituals that we need.
And I was just going to add, Chip, when I saw that, I'm someone who, had a commitment ceremony before I was allowed to get legally married, had a legal marriage, had 3 kids. Now I'm legally divorced. I mean, I've kind of been through all of those rituals. One thing that I find really interesting in our community is how we handle those rituals very differently. One, with regard to age. When we have kids in the LGBTQ community, when we partner, when we do those things is very different, I think, age-wise compared to our cisgender and heterosexual peers. But also the types of families that we create are so different. So many of us now, our parents, we have probably the largest generation of LGBTQ elders that are parents than we've ever had. And the ways that we build our families are so different than our heterosexual counterparts. And I think there's such beauty in that I love the idea of kind of exploring that and how we build family and go through rituals in our own ways, even if they're rituals that are mirrored by broader society.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can't add anything right now. I mean, rituals is such a broad, general term, which I'm, my life is all about ritual. I think that's something to really explore in the workshop.
We
Also.
will.
I'm also thinking of listening to everyone of wanting. Yeah. Anyway, there's another conversation coming.
Okay, Michael, let's give you the opportunity to say
Hi
something.
there. It's good to see you, Chip. I'm Mikhail Patrick Bovines. I live here in San Francisco. And one thing I just want to make a comment. When I was very young, I was aware I was different from my brother, and he made it very apparent that I was different from him through teasing me. He was very aggressive and hostile, and I was very creative. So the pain of being different was such a burden I carried in my childhood from like 6 years old. And that kind of abusive environment where my brother was humiliating me. And it kind of started me on my spiritual journey to understand myself. And in high school, I started to meditate. And a message came through in my meditation from my higher self that said, basically, as I was struggling with my sexuality, my identity, that I was born different because I came here to make a difference. And that just kind of changed everything and was a turning point in my life. And one of the things that I facilitate here in San Francisco, which has been such a powerful resource for myself and others, is a gay men's discussion group, is gay and bisexual men's discussion group. And it's a 6-week program. And what I've discovered is all of us are so unique. And I love to hear the stories from the different ages, especially the younger generation. But most of us, 80%, are in our 50s and 60s, and they're reaching out because they want community and connection. But we all have different experiences, but at the common core is our emotional body, is our emotional feelings. And we all know what it feels like to be rejected, humiliated, celebrated, rejoiced. And when we start to come together as a group to see the men bond and connect and open up. It's so necessary, so important, and it is the right time. So I love what you're doing with MEA. I love this group, and I love the fact that all of you have been sharing your spiritual nature as well as kind of the importance of the timing right now. I think men are and women are ready to really stand in the power and the strength of who they are and be seen in the world, and then to come together. One last thing is that, people say, is this a therapy group? And I'm like, no, I'm not a therapist. But it is very therapeutic, because just being heard, seen, and being able to share who you are with like-minded men and women is so powerful. And so thank you for hosting this, Chip. And I might check into attending in June as well.
Oh, we'd love to have you, Mikhail. I called on Michael Stern, and Mikhail, I know your name's slightly different. So thank you.
I'm so sorry.
No. I'm glad you're here. It's great. It's great to see you. I'm sorry I called you Michael.
No worries.
Michael Stern, just a minute or two. That's it.
Yes, it's a kind of continuation. Once I felt cursed being different, and now I feel blessed because the conformism is such a disease that so many fall prey to. So one of the things as an elder that I wonder, is that going to be part of the discussion, is how we relate to the transition of death and dying as we get closer, and the baby boomers, that we're such a majority, and creating a whole new language and relationship with welcoming this beautiful transition that only outsiders of the current culture could discover and share. That's it.
Absolutely. I think that, that's will definitely be part of the owning wisdom piece. How do we own the wisdom of understanding what it means to have a wrestle vehicle that we were issued at birth, that at some point is meant to disintegrate. And what do we do with this in our process of learning that disintegration is part of the beautiful and magical cycle of life? So, well. This was an hour of rich conversation. I just want to say I'm really excited about this particular week. It's gonna be great. And for those of you who can join us, would love to have you join us. Go ahead to the MEA website, meawisdom.com, and look at the workshop in Santa Fe, June 17th to the 22nd. If you can't join us, just, and you're an MEA alum, thank you for being an alum. If you're not an alum, you've never participated in MEA in any way, check out what else we've got going on. And it's a beautiful community. It really is. And while we have a lot of men here right now, the community is about, it's 2% non-binary, and it's about 62% women and 36% men. So it's a lot of women in our community. Thank you, everybody. And Leslie, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, but
no, just that this was really wonderful. It was great to see you all here and learn so much always. What an incredible panel. Appreciate you all, and hope to see some of you in June at the workshop or another workshop in Santa Fe or Baja. So check us out. And you can always reach out to us. I'm at Leslie@meawisdom.com if you have any questions at all about any of our programs.
Beautiful.
And
Thanks,
thank you,
everybody.
Chip.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you all.